Good morning. Oh, that's good energy. Great, we're off to a good start. Thanks to you all for being here for AI for Legal Aid, everything you were afraid to ask and should know. I'm Kristen Sunday. I'm the co-founder and CEO over at Paladin, the pro bono management platform, and I'll let Laura introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Laura Safdie. I'm the head of innovation for legal at Thomson Reuters and the former co-founder of Casetext, the legal AI company.
All right, we're going to cover a lot of things today, and it's going to be really a continuation of the AI summit that we had yesterday. And just out of curiosity, how many of y'all were there yesterday? Oh my gosh, and you're back for more. Thank you. That's the best compliment ever. Okay, great.
So we're going to have to up our game a little bit.
I know. Okay, so you'll hear a little bit of what you heard yesterday and some new things, so that's really helpful to know. Okay, great. And then for those of you who are new, welcome. We are so excited to be chatting about AI today and all of its potential applications. Before we get started, this is a session on everything you should know but we're afraid to ask, and so we are going to use the app. We want to make this engaging, interactive. In the app, there is a functionality for live Q&A where you can ask a question. This is your moment. Let's get all the questions out on the table. You can ask it anonymously, so we will never know who sent it. We want to make sure that we're answering as many questions as we can on the fly. And then at the end, we'll also open it up for live Q&A if you want to share it more broadly. So don't be afraid to use the app. I will be checking in on it as we go. All right, so today we have a brief agenda. We're going to be chatting about the state of AI technology, why it matters for legal aid, talk through some real LSO AI applications, discuss some key considerations for how you might think about including AI at your organization, review a few evaluation strategies, and then at the end, we're going to leave you with a practical guide to get started. And this is really a compilation of all the key takeaways and learnings from yesterday that we're going to share with you as a blueprint to be able to take back and start implementing your own AI projects. Before we get started, is there anything else?
This is a safe space, so we really want to make sure to cover your questions. So there is no question too elementary that we want to talk about today.
Exactly. Okay, good. Well, please feel free to use the app. All right, so we're going to start with a little chat with Laura, since she is our in-house expert. And Laura has been working in legal AI for a while with her previous company, Casetext, that got acquired by Thomson Reuters in 2023. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about how the technology has evolved over time and what's led us to this inflection point?
Absolutely. So just to start, just to say, because you called me an AI expert, I think that everyone operating the space would say that no one really wants to call themselves an AI expert, or at least I'll speak for myself. The area is evolving so quickly. Even those of us who've been working in the space for some time, it's really stunning the rate of change and the rate at which we need to not only monitor that change and figure out how to respond to it. So maybe I have expertise sitting here today, and then already by like tomorrow or next week, I'm going to feel out of date. And so that's just to give everyone a context about how fast things are moving. But to take a step back, AI has been around for a long time. This isn't actually new, and it actually describes a basket of different types of technology strategies and approaches, all of which have a few kind of similar characteristics. And just to say, to start, I know we have a broad range of different levels of like familiarity and engagement with AI technology in the room, so forgive me if some of this is elementary, but I wanted to start kind of at first principles. But in short, AI, you may have heard of machine learning and deep knowledge and a range of different approaches. And all of them have similar characteristics. They improve their performance over time, whether it's by pattern recognition, trial and error, learning from data. They are increasingly able to reason, to think in ways that increasingly kind of approximate how we would think about a human brain thinking. So actually engage in inference, actually engage in solving problems which require a level of analysis that we didn't see in technology prior to this moment in history. They can understand, they can interpret language, they can generate language, they can understand the relationship between different words. And that allows it to get to a place where it can actually weigh options and make decisions. And that last piece is super critical. That's what's giving us like our Netflix feed, which tells us which movies we would like. It's what gives us self-driving cars. And it's what gives us the ability to have just general recommendation systems, which are extremely important and critical to a lot of kind of substantive legal technology applications. So I guess taking a step back for that, then what's all the fuss about this moment? Like, why are we all talking about AI if this is technology that's been around for some time? In my experience, what we saw is that GPT-4, which is a large language model from OpenAI, was this incredibly important turning point. We and my team had been following and engaging with the development of neural network scholarship and the first large language models since they were kind of invented in 2017. And we were deeply engaged with the foundation model developers. We were testing, we were getting feedback, and it was super interesting. We saw that something interesting was brewing, but it was nowhere near safe for work, nowhere near professional grade, nothing I would trust with the kind of critical and high stakes work that all the legal professionals in this room do. For some really important reasons, because the large language model, even the pre-GPT-4 versions of them, were incredibly powerful in terms of reasoning, in terms of processing power, but they couldn't be constrained effectively to a defined source of knowledge. So large language models are trained on public data. And at this point, we have reason to believe from some of the statements that have come out of some of the foundation model developers that the latest models have actually been trained on all publicly available text form data, which is just really hard to wrap your mind around. All the articles, all the websites, even many, many videos. And it's led us to this place where it has a ton of information out in the world, but it can't be constrained to verifiable sources of knowledge, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is perfectly fine for really low stakes activities like what's going on with my favorite celebrity, super not fine for legal work, as everybody here knows. When we saw GPT-4, things materially changed. What we saw that model able to do was we could point the processing power at a defined, verifiable source of data and constrain the model to only answer for that data. That might seem like incremental, but it was actually transformative. What it meant is that we could ask questions about a litigation record and know that we would get answers from that litigation record, or it allowed us to build technology around the processing power of the model that could give us real legal answers to real legal questions. And we saw this validated over and over again. Like many of you probably saw the study where we had a large language model, not we, Stanford researchers had a large language model take the Uniform Bar Exam. And so the GPT 3.5, which is the model right before GPT-4, took the bar exam and got 10th percentile. So it meant that they did better than 10% of real world test takers, which is impressive for technology to do that, but doesn't get us where we want to go. And then when you shift to just the next model, which was really a couple years later when it came out, all the studies are somewhere between mid-70s and 90th percentile, which means that a machine did better than most of us in this room on the bar exam, and that is a really compelling turning point. And so that's how we got to this moment. We are in this place now where we have incredibly powerful large language models. We now have far more competition and activity from the developer side, and so we're seeing these models evolve and change and become more powerful very regularly.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm curious, like, how long did it take your team to adapt from the pre-GPT-4 models to this one?
The honest answer is that we pivoted the whole company in a week.
Wow, a week.
Because it took not long for us to see how significant this change was. And we realized that there are going to be myriad ways that people will interact with and leverage and drive impact using this technology. And that it didn't make everything before obsolete, but it meant this is where we wanted to invest our effort.
Wow, that's amazing. And what were the initial use cases that you all were thinking about?
So we had focused on substantive legal tasks, which is obviously different than a broad range of other really valuable activities that people can do amplified by AI, like back office, like non-legal drafting. But we were hyper-focused on how can we automate legal research tasks, how can we automate legal drafting tasks, and really critically, I think especially to this community, is how do you automate review, analysis of large quantities of documents, because that is just an area where you can save an enormous amount of time when you get to shift from traditional search against documents where you're going to miss something. You just can't imagine all the ways that humans might contort language to asking a question and having the model have the processing power of a human brain to understand she's asking this, but she really means all these other things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so how much do lawyers actually need to know about LLMs and how this works under the hood in order to work with it?
So it's super important to actually use AI to help you understand the opportunities, its limitations, and how to make sure that it can be used effectively. The LLMs themselves, and I used this analogy yesterday, so forgive me for those who are in the room. Also, it came to me like at midnight the night before, so any feedback is appreciated if it's unclear. But essentially, I think of LLM as an engine, like a mechanical engine. It's super powerful, but I don't actually drive an engine. An engine is the processing power, and it doesn't solve for me any particular problem, but it has the potential to solve quite a lot of problems. But if I have a specific use case, like when I needed to get to the airport and I had to drive there, I had to get in a car. The car was my vehicle, and that vehicle was developed with a specific use case in mind, the use case of driving. So the car couldn't have gone anywhere without an engine in it, but the engine wasn't enough to get me there. And my use case has a host of other requirements that are not really relevant to the LLM itself. I need seatbelts for safety. I like to listen to the radio. All sorts of things that I would consider are required for me to buy a car need to be in that vehicle, in that application, in that solution to my problem. But then if I have a different problem, like I need to fly from San Francisco to Phoenix, I can't, well, I could drive, but I'd rather not. I want to get in a plane and I want to fly. And so humanity has decided we're going to put an engine in this different type of vehicle, in a plane, and we're going to fly. And that plane, I could expect it to do this use case for me. And so I would think of LLMs in much the same way. It's important to know the engine's power. It's important to know its limitations, what it can do well, what it can't, what are the risks that we need to mitigate against. But often the real solutions are in the vehicles, and those are the things that we consider when we have a problem we want to solve. You may engage with a legal technology provider to solve that problem. You may build your own solution, but it's the vehicle where you really need to scope out what's your problem and how do you use the engine to solve it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy so much. Like, I'm going to totally borrow this moving forward, but as I hope you all do too. But I think it's such a good point, and we'll talk about this at the end. Like, what are some practical steps you can take back to your organizations in order to develop a solution? But figuring out what the actual problem is that you're trying to solve for, and then what is the specific use case that you can use AI to apply to it to make a solution is really key in just getting started. So that's really helpful. Thank you. All right, I'm checking our questions now. All right. Oh my goodness. Oh, we already have a couple in here. Okay, great. I'm going to go through these as Laura is answering my next question, which is about why this matters for legal aid. So we talked a little bit about it for your legal research purposes and for Casetext, and obviously there's so many large legal tech companies already using AI, and I think we can learn a lot from what they've already built and are working through to apply that to legal aid, but I also think there are some really specific legal aid use cases. So I'm curious for your thoughts on how this can translate to help the legal aid community.
Absolutely. So high level first, let's just talk about how it can impact the legal profession, and then specifically what it means for legal aid, which of course we're all going to be kind of building the vision for what it means for legal aid together, just to make the point. But to start, generative AI is going to significantly amplify, if used effectively, and we roll it out kind of proactively, it can significantly amplify the impact of the legal aid community. It can significantly improve the way we think about how we spend our time on tasks and how we spend our time on the highest impact work, where you have your kind of experience and strategic vision realized, where you can connect with people who need to connect with you and feel supported, rather than focusing so much of our days on tasks that can now increasingly be done very well by machines. And I think this manifests in three kind of important categories. One is just, how can we provide better, faster service for clients? So generative AI can read and analyze and write much at the same level of an experienced paralegal or junior associate. That is like a normative perspective. Everyone is going to come to their own conclusion as you begin to work with AI on specific use cases, but we've seen that level of competency in substantive work. And what that means is that you can also do so many of these really critical but often repetitive tasks in a fraction of the time. And saving that level of time is obviously super important, especially to all lawyers, but especially to lawyers who serve people who, there are communities that just are wildly underserved by the resources available. And so this seems like an enormous opportunity. The technology also is extremely thorough, and there are ways to apply it with a very high degree of accuracy. To be clear, like, AI isn't magic. There are well-documented limitations. We should get into some of that today. But when applied appropriately in like a professional grade solution that constrains it to reliable sources of knowledge, that makes it easy to check sources within the application, the thoroughness and accuracy far exceeds what humans traditionally can do. And so there's immense opportunity in direct client service. But there are other maybe less obvious opportunities, like helping you manage your organizations. AI solutions can be your marketing assistant, can write your website content, your social media content, your advertisements. It can be your HR aid. It can help you not make hiring decisions. We'll talk about some issues with ethics and bias later, but it can really help you kind of review applications. It can help you draft interview questions. It can be your grant writer. This is a use case that has exploded with the LSOs that I've been working with, where a grant application that would normally take 2 days might take 30 minutes. And so there are a lot of ways you can use it to help manage the organization. And finally, and I think this is the area where, like, thank you to John Levy yesterday for making this point really eloquently at the end of the day. Collectively, if we really are proactive and forward-looking about how to leverage this technology, the collective impact of adoption across the legal aid community on these concrete value-creating use cases means we are going to fundamentally shift the kind of work we do every day. Like I was saying before, from task completion, which is critical, but also not the highest level use of many of our legal experience, to empathy, impact, strategy, the types of things that computers can't do for us. I think this will also level the playing field. When you can review boxes and boxes of documents in minutes compared to in hours or days, that means that you're less vulnerable to being snowed over by an adversary that has way more resources. We can foster further collaboration. Succeeding with AI not only saves you the time to collaborate with peers, but it's also kind of an imperative now. None of us are going to be experts on our own, but collectively we're going to develop so much expertise, and so collaboration is super key to success. And I would also say a couple other points that may not be as obvious. One is the mental health and work-life balance of everyone in this room and your peers is so critical. It's an area we don't talk about enough, and being able to shift your work from such a magnitude of tasks, I think, is going to have a massive impact on our ability to really achieve better work-life balance in this space. And not to mention, we'll talk about this more, but there are a range of AI applications out in the world that we need to be prepared for. So when AI is used in housing decisions, in hiring decisions, in sentencing, like, if you're unfamiliar with AI and the government brings in AI tools against you, you are going to be less able to respond effectively for your client. So developing the expertise of using AI, even in totally different and totally safe use cases, will prepare you for fighting the unsafe use cases.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll go into some of those use cases in a few. And I think, like, something else to add is that in reality, our pro bono clients and other clients are already using AI, right? Like, they're already consulting ChatGPT for answers to their legal issues. And so I think we have a responsibility and an obligation to at least explore how we can harness this technology to give them access to legal information that's going to be more accurate and also more ethical and safer for them to use themselves longer term. So I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier about how AI is changing so quickly. This is a question from the audience. You mentioned how AI is changing so quickly. I hear that so much. Can you talk about how things have changed in the past month or 6 months, and how does this impact a casual user? Like, as a technologist, how do you think about how tech will be evolving and then also affecting your users?
Great question. The short answer is we don't know what we don't know. So just, like, have that in the back of your mind, and that's where kind of the comment about you might be an expert today, but tomorrow you need to rebuild your expertise. But I will say, I was at OpenAI at kind of a friends and family demo kind of thing they did a few months ago, and they showed a technology that actually, like, stopped me cold. Essentially, you had AI listening to audio of a person speaking, like just regular speaking, like of a non-interesting topic, and then they had the AI just tell a story, like based on a prompt, like, I want a story about a few bears that are walking in the forest and doing X, Y, and Z. Doesn't matter. So they had AI write this story, and then they took the audio from this woman that was talking about something, and then they had her tell the story in French with her voice, real time. So let's pause and reflect on what that could mean for society for a moment. You can make someone's voice, and also now, by the way, video, although that's not public yet, say and do whatever you want. You can have them do it in whatever language, and it looks pretty real. It is not perfect in all these many ways, but it tells me that the technology is close enough to be extremely important and extremely dangerous. And so that isn't exactly as relevant to like what are our legal use cases today, but I think for lawyers and for advocates of justice, having awareness of this technology is so, so critical, and following it closely enough that you can kind of issue spot as these come out in the world, like where are the use cases that we see things like that going? What are the regulatory constraints? What are the societal constraints? And where are their gaps? Because we don't quite yet know how to control this.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, and that's why it's also so important and so incredible that there are so many of you in this room, because I think we're just at this moment in time where we can come together as a community and lay the foundations to understand like not only what is AI, how does it work, but also like start raising issues and issue spotting, like Laura was saying, about what is happening in the field, what are we seeing that could affect our clients, and sharing this information amongst ourselves so that we can all elevate our knowledge together. And this is just such a unique opportunity to really lay that foundation.
And there are, of course, also really positive use cases of that technology. This is not intended to be doom and gloom. I just read about a new application of AI that can very efficiently review police body cam footage and identify where there are potential problems or red flags. And that is something that there's no legal aid organization in the world that has the bandwidth to do that kind of work at that scale. So while there's obvious risks, there's still opportunities as well.
Yep. All right, I want to take one more question from the audience before we move on around your point around mental health and work-life balance. So the question is, AI can expand our ability to do higher impact work by doing smaller tasks, but orgs are already struggling with being overworked and underpaid. How can we actually ensure implementing AI at our orgs doesn't exacerbate work-life balance even more?
Such a good question. And later on, we expected to chat about this a little, but let's pull it forward. AI, when you're going on an AI journey, right? Like you're not going to learn it all tomorrow. You're not going to take on 100 use cases tomorrow. We have to start somewhere. But also, I'd recommend that the mandate needs to come from the top of the organization. This isn't something we do in our free time. This isn't something you do on the weekend. This is a key strategic priority for the organization to provide our professionals with the skills and opportunity to learn. And so that's one thing I would advocate for, is for making kind of a strategic choice at the organization that we have to make space for this. It's also engaging with partners that can provide a framework or a pathway to that education. There is a ton of publicly available information already, but there are specific kind of legal technology partners that can assist and provide kind of substantive support and also use case ideas, what AI is really good at, what it's not. And so I think starting from that framework of this isn't just something you have to do in addition to everything else, it's something that we're making an investment in our future and our ability to serve the communities we serve.
Yeah, I love that. And you raise a good point that I brought up yesterday. I think it's helpful to think about AI exploration in kind of three main buckets. The first is what you can build yourselves internally, taking into account like the skills and the resources that you have. The second is figuring out which tech partners you can work with to collaborate on joint projects. Maybe you get external budget to work on those projects that you can build and maintain internally. And the third is exploring off-the-shelf solutions. So we're going to talk about all three of those today, but really figuring out what are the opportunities for partnerships among some of the larger tech companies who are offering programs for nonprofits and legal services and organizations like Thomson Reuters and their AI for Justice initiative, and Relativity, Everlaw. They have free programs for nonprofits and free product that they're offering to help you get started with AI and build your own internal capabilities. So those are things that we want to also share with each other as we learn and develop programming to make sure that we're leaning on existing resources that have already been built out, vetted, and approved by the larger company so that we can use them safely for legal aid applications. Legal Aid Innovators is the TR program. Okay, we'll get there.
It's a good transition then to some of the things we saw LSOs building yesterday, which is a good mix of those things.
Exactly. So one thing we did want to share today was just a couple different use cases. And yeah, yesterday we demoed, oh my goodness, a lot, 11 demos of different products in the field. We'll just demo 2 today for the sake of time. But we wanted to show you one program that was built internally by a legal aid organization, supported by LodgeRide, which was an external vendor. Tom Martin's fantastic and does a lot of work with legal aid organizations in prompt engineering and building AI tools. So Legal Aid of North Carolina built LEA, which is a system that provides better legal information to their clients online faster. They get like tens of thousands or maybe even 100,000 calls per year to their hotline, and they just literally physically cannot answer all of these calls. And so they wanted to develop a system that would provide legal information to folks in a lot more easily to digest, streamlined way, and hopefully help triage folks and direct them to other resources before needing to talk to a human. So let's take us out of this app and into our demo, and you can see what they've built.
Hi, my name is Leah. I was created by Legal Aid of North Carolina as an AI-powered virtual assistant. Developed in Legal Aid's Innovation Lab in collaboration with LodgeRide, I am designed to provide efficient and high-quality legal information to underserved communities. I do not provide legal advice, but I can give you helpful information and resources. Let's see how this actually works. You can start with the suggestions in the blue tabs or type your answer in the chat box, such as, what are my rights as a tenant? Be clear and specific. The more details you give, the better I can help. Here are some search results. If you are a victim of domestic violence, there are key points listed at the top. Additional resources include links to self-help and links to clinics at Legal Aid. Follow the prompts. If I ask for more information, just answer to get the best help. Come try me out on our website at legalaidnc.org. I am here to help you find information and resources.
Okay, so that was one short example. They worked so hard on this at Legal Aid of North Carolina. I think they went through 8 or 9 iterations and training sessions and spent months testing this out before it actually went live. And since going live last summer, they've helped 14,000 people with providing legal information, and those are people that might not have gotten through to someone on the hotline in a timely manner in order to get the answers that they needed. So another thing that's I think is very cool about this system is that it can answer questions in different languages. It can support different levels of reading and writing and submissions. And the technology is just so dynamic that you can really use it in a multitude of ways. I was talking yesterday with Satish, who gave me an example that he just saw a new tool come out of a Harvard Law class that uses voice automation to call clients who had requested information on Legal Aid Organization's website and essentially do an intake call over the phone using AI. So you don't actually need a human. You can just call, it prompts the questions, it understands people's responses, jots them all down into the intake form, and then it can effectively triage them and make sure they get to the right person within the organization. So when we think about the 50% of people that get turned away by legal services organizations just due to a lack of capacity, this is going to be an absolute game changer in our being able to help more people. So that's one example. I'm going to show you another one. And this is a program that was built out of Microsoft, and Adrian Palma is here today. He's on their pro bono team there, and they were leveraging AI to help with DACA work and applications. So I'm going to share their story.
At Microsoft, we believe in leveraging technology for societal good. The DACA Copilot project is one of our proudest achievements, combining AI and human ingenuity to support dreamers in their pursuit of legal status. By combining Microsoft's technology with employee time and talent, the Microsoft Pro Bono program aims to deliver scalable solutions in response to the access to justice crisis, for which 5 billion people worldwide have unmet justice needs.
As a dreamer myself, I understand the challenges faced by DACA recipients. The DACA Copilot is more than just technology. It is a lifeline that empowers pro bono volunteers to amplify their work and ensure dreamers can renew their status swiftly and securely, safeguarding their dreams and futures. My lived experience inspired me to lead a diverse hackathon team to scale Microsoft's monthly DACA clinics with the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, culminating in this development project. The DACA Copilot is an AI tool designed to enhance the impact of pro bono volunteers and streamline clinic operations, generating DACA renewal applications in just 30 seconds. By analyzing data from existing renewals and intake forms, it eliminates manual form filling and reduces data entry mistakes, cutting the volunteer workload by 90%, from 10 hours to just 1 to 2 hours per case. Let me share with you what we created. The DACA Copilot streamlines volunteer engagement by providing clinic information, trainings and resources, and signing up volunteers through a landing page. Volunteers use the DACA Copilot web application to manage casework, track time, chat with the legal team, create renewal forms and send them for attorney review, collect volunteer signature, and organize completed DACA renewal packet for client filing. The DACA Copilot also includes an AI Copilot, Luz, that houses a generative AI prompt library to streamline volunteer workflows. We keep human oversight in the process, allowing expert attorney reviewers to validate and finalize renewals through the DACA Copilot web application. Administrators have a dashboard view of all cases, their status, and volunteer profiles, including pro bono hours. They can use Luz and generative AI to assign legal teams and review case status summaries. We innovated responsibly, harnessing AI to empower volunteers and amplify impact, all while safeguarding security and privacy to scale pro bono legal services for dreamers.
Our vision is to continue leveraging responsible AI to create inclusive and innovative solutions that serve our communities. The DACA Copilot is just the beginning. Together, we can multiply our impact and make a real difference.
All right, I hope those 2 demos were helpful. And I know that Adrian and the team over at Microsoft has already started working with other legal services organizations and nonprofits to extend Copilot and its abilities to build these AI tools more broadly. So if you want to ask him some questions about it at the end, can you just throw up your hand real quick, Adrian? Thank you. You can come find him.
And so just, I wanted to call out a couple things about those 2 demos. So the first one, Leah, is a consumer layperson-facing tool. And the second one is an attorney or legal professional-facing tool. I think that's really important as we think about our different vehicles and the different problems we're trying to solve. You know, we'll talk about this a little more when we start discussing issues relating to ethics and bias, but obviously there's a significant difference between giving a layperson actionable legal information on which they can then use that verifiable information to then take steps like file a form or know who to go to next, versus giving information that could veer into what might look like legal advice from a machine. Those are 2 very different approaches, so it's just something to keep in mind as we think about these kind of lay people facing solutions. Also, this is an example of like end-to-end, fully built out, like pretty complex workflows in the case of Microsoft, and obviously most people in the room don't have kind of the resources and technical expertise that a Microsoft has, but we also saw a broad range of examples of use cases yesterday that I think really ran the gamut from homemade to off the shelf, but really applying those off the shelf solutions to their own specific problems. And we just saw incredible things. We saw the chatbot from New York City that gives instruction to people that are looking to understand what repairs they're entitled to and instruction about how to advocate for themselves to their landlords. We heard from an innocence organization that has been using an AI assistant recently, and they walked us through, I'll call the Innocence Center in San Diego. The executive director is Michael Szymanczyk, and he walked us through an example of one case where they just earned one exoneration for someone who was improperly imprisoned for 20 years for a murder that he did not commit. And it was just an awful story. It took him so long to get justice. And then he flipped and talked about what this case would have looked like if it came today and he had access to the tools that he has access to today. And he made this statement that, because we're among friends, I'll share, like I almost started crying on stage. It was so compelling. He said that if he had had access to this technology when he ran this case, he would have gotten this person out of jail a decade earlier. And this is one person, one use case, one application, and it just put into like stark refrain how big the opportunity is. And so these are just a couple examples, but I don't want you to feel like they're so advanced and sophisticated and polished that it means that your small team can't do anything in this space. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get started even if you don't have the resources of like a Microsoft.
Yeah, and I think something to keep in mind is that, if you're worried about building tools that are external and that potential clients could be engaging with, or something that is as built out as Microsoft's tool that engages pro bono lawyers outside the organization, you can start small and you can start internally to build tools yourselves and just get comfortable with the technology and really see the power of it firsthand. And so after yesterday, I just compiled a list of 10 examples of ways that organizations are currently using internal tools like ChatGPT, Gemini for Workspace, Copilot, JosephQ, just to address a few different areas internally. So I won't read these off, but I'll just put them up for you to take a look at and figure out, are there some of these that resonate more than others where you might be able to build internal applications to just address some of the day-to-day and just build comfort. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some key considerations. So I noticed a lot of questions in the chat are around ethics and AI, bias, hallucinations, et cetera. So let's tackle some of these harder questions because it's not a silver bullet, obviously, and one big takeaway we had yesterday was that AI has this like transformational potential for legal aid, and I truly think it is going to be the game changer and the opportunity of our lifetime to help. But we're also in the earliest of innings, and we're still working together to build quality standards around what success should look like and what high quality outputs look like. We're still working together to understand, what data sources we can use as inputs and how do we train the AI to only provide information and responses based on a closed data set that we have high confidence in its accuracy and its legitimacy. So let's tackle some of these key considerations. And I know you've thought about these long and hard for many years now, so I'll let you share a couple of thoughts.
Sure, and then we can absolutely open it up for questions on these topics because we want to make sure that we're addressing the concerns that are kind of keeping all of us up at night. But to start with kind of accuracy and fit for purpose, and we'll think more about, how do we start down this path of our AI journey? How do you start thinking about your first use case and your first solution? When we're doing that, we really need to think about making sure we're using tools that are appropriate for the use case you envision. So if it's a professional use case, if it's like actual substantive legal work, then you need to think about different accuracy controls and ability to validate the sources of data than if you're doing something that, like writing a social media post, which doesn't have obviously the same stakes at play. And so as you're engaging with solutions, we're thinking about how do I know that the results I'm getting are mostly accurate? And I said mostly on purpose. Like I said, this isn't magic, and every tool you're going to see are going to have accuracy issues in part because of the nature of the technology. Like, we wouldn't expect AI to be all-knowing. AI is actually just a system of technologies that are trained on public knowledge and trained to anticipate the next word or the next sentence. And so that means that it has some important limitations. But when you apply an LLM in a professional application that is designed for law or designed for a specific purpose, what that application is supposed to do is to have a series of prompts within the application to help ensure its accuracy for the purpose established. So that means that there's a series of tests built in, and we can talk more about how to assess that, but in part it's actually engaging with the technology in a really substantive way, in a way that reflects real use cases in a trial period so that you can validate for yourself the results, but also making sure that the product is and that your solution is built in such a way where you can validate the source materials. One of the biggest complaint or critiques of AI, especially the early tools, were this is a total black box. It's spitting out an answer. How am I supposed to know if this is real? It's going to take just as much work for me to then go do it the normal way and then validate its results. But if you're working with a tool that is built for this use case, it should understand that in law, you don't just get to make things up. You have to lean on precedent. You have to lean on citations to authority. And so that means if you're reviewing a large database of documents, you better see in your results a link to where that answer exists in the documents. If you're doing legal research, you better see an answer to the cases and then actually read those cases because, and just to flip very quickly to the ethics and bias piece, ultimately, no AI assistant has your ethical obligations. You still carry your ethical obligations, right? We're the lawyers, and we're the ones who have to ensure that everything we're putting in front of a court, every piece of advice we're giving to a client is verifiable. And so I would think of this not as we are not outsourcing our jobs. We're not outsourcing our ethical obligations to AI. We are using AI as a tool to elevate actionable information that we as the lawyer will apply our expertise, our experience, our strategy to, and make our own decisions. So that's kind of thing one. Thing two, data security and privacy are obviously exceptionally important issues, especially when we're talking about using AI for legal practice. We have exceptionally sensitive confidential client data, and so that's yet another reason why the solution that you use has to be built to keep that data safe. And so there will be kind of security reviews that you can conduct, and if you want to know what questions to ask, there are resources out there, and we can compile some to circulate to attendees. But in short, it's how is my data and how is my client's data being used? How are you ensuring that that data isn't being used in such a way that it risks training an underlying large language model? Because if it trains a large language model, it runs the risk potentially of that data appearing in search results later. Even those of us who work in the space, like how the large language models manifest answers from training sets is not something that can really be controlled. And so you need to make sure that the way you interact with it protects your client's data, of course, encrypted end-to-end and all the usual stuff. So that is a review that's critically important in the space. ChatGPT, where for normal consumer use, doesn't have those kinds of controls. But for enterprise, it does have those kinds of controls. But you go a level deeper and ask, well, ChatGPT or OpenAI, are you actually saving this data and then is it potentially subject to a subpoena? And so there are kind of layers of questions you want to ask to understand where your data ultimately goes and how it's going to be used. And then finally, on ethics and bias, like I mentioned, it's our obligation to validate, and so it means that we need to use tools that enable us to do so. It's our obligation as the attorney to continue to provide accurate guidance, and it's also our obligation to be aware of bias issues within AI, but also to understand that AI is not a monolith. To avoid being in a conversation where we say, well, you know, we heard there are bias issues in AI because it was trained on a biased public data set, therefore AI is not worth using or too dangerous to use. I would advise that we don't take such an approach. John Levy called it yesterday throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's that we need to use AI in proper ways. And so I would distinguish, as you're thinking about AI solutions, between using AI to supplant human decision making. That is an exceptionally dangerous set of uses. That's using AI to make hiring decisions. That's using AI to make housing decisions, educational decisions, sentencing decisions. That's where we're going to see a ton of risk and where our knowledge of the underlying technology will help prepare us to combat that risk. Super different than using AI in a professional way to elevate information that helps humans make better decisions. Then the ethical obligation is validate that information. Make sure it's accurate information. Make sure you know where it's coming from, that it's a verifiable source of data. But you're still the one making the decision. And so as you're thinking about bias in AI, I think it's a critically important societal issue. It's critically important to ensuring justice broadly within this country, but it's a very different issue if you're dealing with tools that are more about elevating information.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point and an important segue into the top question in our chat right now, which is, I worry about a world where the rich get human attorneys and the poor are relegated to cheap AI in lieu of capable legal professionals or more accessible systems. How can we address these types of inequities while using AI to help low-income people?
We could have a whole roundtable discussion just on that for like an hour. It's such a good question. My perspective, although I would love to hear from the group, is that we need to have extremely high standards of quality, and also we need to compare it to the real world. We need to compare it to what's happening in real life today and not some hypothetical rosy picture of what the justice system looks like in America right now. We have more than 90% of civil legal needs are going unrepresented. There are countless criminal defendants that are receiving inadequate representation. And so I'm not saying that the world is so challenging and therefore that question doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. And also we should be marching on kind of a trajectory of improvement. Now, that question is very real. Like, do we end up creating a bifurcated world? I think that's the responsibility of everyone in this room and our colleagues and our funders and our boards to really engage with that. What are the kinds of AI solutions we're putting out in the world? How do we make sure that they are accurate and dependable and maintained? Someone brought that, I think Margaret Hagan brought that up yesterday. When you put out an AI solution, you need to have a plan and resourcing to maintain it. But we should also remember that we're starting from a pretty tough place, and it provides, I think, an opportunity to give far more guidance and far more information to people who right now are maybe sitting on a hotline for 45 minutes waiting than giving up, you know?
Right. Or just going to Google.
Or
and
going to
getting
Google, great point.
information
Going to Google.
and acting on that, you know? And okay, along those lines, I want to stay with the inequity theme for a second because it's something that's really important and clearly top of mind for us all. Another question is, how can legal aid orgs gain access to AI tech on their limited budgets? The Westlaw, CoCounsel, Lexis, VLEX platforms are way too expensive for legal aid, which may increase disparities between big law and legal aid use.
Also a very important question. So I can speak that from myself, also within Thomson Reuters, we developed an AI for Justice initiative, which is intended to make AI solutions more kind of financially and operationally available. And by that I mean kind of special pricing for legal aid, as well as a host of materials to help that we're developing with LSO partners on what are key legal aid use cases, how do you start, how do we make it kind of accessible and achievable. I think a reality we're facing right now that there isn't a great answer to yet is that it is very expensive to run these systems. It's not like a piece of software you put out in the world and it costs you nothing to maintain. Every search costs money, and there are just very limited GPUs in the world, and that's something that a lot of us are grappling with, that I've been speaking with some of the foundation model developers on like what our options are on how we can address this. That said, I think that ChatGPT Enterprise, Ransom walked us through a walkthrough yesterday that was super compelling about how you can build your own GPT, not, I think, at an expensive price point,
Yeah.
GPT Enterprise. But part of this is how do we make sure that it's financially and operationally accessible? And so that's like a challenge that we all need to take on.
Yeah, and frankly, like that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that the larger tech companies like Thomson Reuters and Everlaw and Relativity and Steno and LegalZoom and Microsoft were all in this conversation. This conference and this summit yesterday, like to figure out these questions, that is why we're all here. And we can't do that on our own. We have to do that together. And it's only by surfacing these questions and concerns and thinking about the different use cases and understanding how the big companies are currently using AI and comparing that with the resources that we have as a community and what people on the ground that we're seeing day to day need in order to get better, more effective legal services. Those are all questions that I think we're going to be working through for a while. And frankly, like we're not going to have an answer tomorrow. But by taking advantage of some of the programs that they're offering, getting some early use cases and case studies out from some of our partners, and figuring out how we iterate as a community, I think is going to be really essential.
I just saw that we have 10 minutes left.
Yes,
so we
we're
should
gonna keep
probably
going. Okay.
Open it up.
Yeah, well, one other thing that I want to add also, which is why I think like this foundational conversation and this week is so important, is one of the challenges that I've seen in the past is that organizations will get grants and they'll go off in their silos and build a product that they can use, and it's not necessarily adaptable to other organizations. It's not necessarily sustainable. Maybe there was a third partner involved that is helping maintain it, but it's not upkept or updated. And I really do think, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but this is a moment in time where we can come together with companies that are doing this sustainably and develop blueprints as we go, because we're so early in this conversation, that we can replicate much more efficiently across the board that is going to change the way that we operate. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. Let's talk about some evaluation strategies, because another question was, how do we assess the different options and the organizations and technologies that we have available to us?
Yes, so I'll cover this super fast. We have time for some questions. Like I mentioned earlier, a technology solution that is professional grade. What does that mean? It has the data security and privacy controls that you need. You know that it's pulling from reliable, verifiable sources of data. You know that you're working with a team that has domain expertise. This is kind of one of the risks of using consumer facing products for legal use cases. There's a whole host of domain expertise built into these products to help derive the kind of accuracy of results that we need. And so it doesn't mean that, oh, if it's marketed as legal, then it's definitely good. I'm not saying that. You have to do your own assessment, but you're more likely to find something fit to purpose if you're dealing with a legal specific tool for legal specific substantive use cases, as distinct from from back office. And finally, I'd advise that you're working with partners to the extent that you're building or using off the shelf with outside partners, that you're working with someone who's going to be there for the long haul. We talked about how this is a journey and the technology is evolving so quickly. You want to see that they have the team, the expertise, the support system, the training to help you go down your path on your AI journey, that it's not just here's a product, goodbye. I'd recommend that you define achievable use cases and success metrics. One of the ways we've seen this go wrong is because AI is so powerful and can do so many things, is just taking on too much too fast and not having the level of kind of training, engagement, and buy-in from your teams to really do it well. I'd recommend you start with one. There's this concept in product development, minimum viable product. Find the minimum viable use case, one that really matters, but one that you can take on, one that you can define. Understand the success metrics, make sure your teams are bought in, and start there. Succeed small, and then continue to grow. And then the last thing is to just, I'm sure this is obvious, but just to state it, this is going to be a journey, and your teams should be prepared for that. That doesn't mean that it's a second job. It means that in order to succeed in the future, it's a journey we have to go on, and so it's kind of more of a marathon, not a sprint, so not to burn out on it too fast.
Great. All right, so for the sake of time, let's talk practical steps. All right, so how do we get started? Okay, we've had all this great theoretical conversation. I wanted to just share 10 steps that I found useful in figuring out how you actually execute on a project. The first, we've talked about this, identifying a problem. It can be something small, internal. It can be something a little bit bigger around sharing legal information with clients. It can be around your processes internally, like how do I intake and triage clients more effectively? Ton of different use cases that we went through. Just pick one. Ransom always advises to pick the issue that you hate the most. Like, what causes you the most grief at work? What takes you the most time? What do you hate doing the most? Like, I'm terrible at writing emails. It just takes me a long time. I overthink. I probably spend like 10x more time on an email than I should. So now I just write a first draft. I pop it into ChatGPT. I give it some parameters like, I'm a legal tech founder. I'm writing to a law firm about this new product. Can you help me make it sound a little bit more like professional and friendly if I haven't had coffee yet? And it will spit out a version that is much better than the original one they started off. So just start getting your feet wet using everyday use cases, and that will help guide you. Evaluate resources. We talked a little bit about this. There was a question in the chat about follow-up materials. We will send everyone a version of this deck. We will send some templates around just workshopping different use cases for you internally. We'll send some resources around prompt engineering, and then also a list of tech partners that you can reach out to, some of which we've mentioned today, some of which are working with other legal services organizations that we haven't had the chance to dive into. So you can just start those conversations, and if nothing else, you're going to learn from them. They're going to be great thought partners. Conduct stakeholder engagement. So we always want to start with our users. So whether your user is someone who is internal at the organization, whether it's someone you're building for externally, you want to get them in a room, really understand their workflow, and then pinpoint where you can use AI to increase efficiency and effectiveness. And I would encourage involving them along the way. So as I mentioned, Leah spent 8 or 9 iterations of their legal information assistant out with real-world clients before they landed on the version that they wanted to use to make sure that the user interface was clean, it was easy to navigate, and it was genuinely helpful. A couple KPIs and standards that they were using that I think are useful are like, number 1, of course, clients served. Number 2, decreased response time. Number 3, they would ask at the end of each session on a scale of 1 to 5, Uber 5-star rating, how helpful was this? And recently they had a 4-star rating, which was great, and then they took feedback and iterated on that. 5, choosing the right tools. So we talked a little bit about how you do choose the right partner, and it is going to come down to things like, what are your internal capabilities? What is the budget that you have to work with? What are the existing skills that you have among your tech folks? And you can figure out the right partners based on that. Number 6, pilot. So we always recommend starting with a narrow use case and just releasing it to a beta group to get out the kinks before you release it more broadly. Satish at Just Tech and Joseph built a tool with the New York City Housing Court to help answer client questions, then also provide a tool internally for people on the hotline to search internal resources and be able to answer questions faster as they came in. And they tested that Q&A for a year using a process called humans in the loop, where basically it would spit out a response, and then a human would review the response and either okay it or edit it before it went out. And over time, the model developed more accuracy and greater empathy and just overall better answers as a result of this year-long process. So as Laura said, this is definitely a journey, but that's what's going to make it so impactful. 7, train and educate staff. We want to make sure that everyone is as engaged from the beginning as possible. There was a question in the chat about how will we help staff members understand that they're not going to be replaced by AI. As Laura said, think of this as an aid, as an assistant to your work rather than replacing your work. So with the DACA renewal example, Adrian's tool, it used to take 10 hours for one person to help one DACA recipient in filling out those forms. With AI, it dropped it down to 1 to 2 hours. So the same person internally was able to help 5 to 9 more people in that same amount of time, given the effectiveness and the efficiency of these tools. So it's really an empowerment tool more than anything. Lastly, you want to monitor and evaluate it as you go. Then you can expand and scale from there. And then finally, of course, you do need to maintain and update it. Okay, I know we flew through a ton of information today. See, this is why we needed a whole day yesterday, because there's so much more to cover. We can keep going for hours. But Laura and I will be around, and we're on email and happy to chat about any and all of this in greater depth. Before we jump, though, are there any other burning questions? I know we didn't get to everything. We will provide materials after, but any other big questions that we can answer? Yeah.
So you mentioned the voice, the generating content based on the voice. You talk about. Hi there. I didn't realize I was getting a mic. Okay, so you talked about basically deepfake technology, people, creating content based on people's voices, and you talked about, the importance of using this ethically, but that there is also, we are already in a world where others are using this technology unethically and irresponsibly. Is anybody educating legal aid attorneys or any attorneys about how to defend and how to help their clients defend themselves against unethical uses of AI, creating fake content for use in family law, child custody cases, right? For the villains who are using this technology, right? Is there anybody who is thinking about that and preparing people like us, right, to to contend with that?
Great question.
I will say that we all, I'm not going to say get comfortable, we all have to acknowledge that we're in a bit of a Wild West moment. So I'm not going to pretend that there is kind of a well-organized, accountable consortium to solve that problem yet.
is.
There is already? So
In
that's
process,
changing so
in
fast.
process. Yes, this is the thing. These are updating by the day. Well, yes, we're in the wild, wild west. Yes, people are thinking about it. So the National Center for State Courts is working with TR.
Yes.
I'm a member of that working group to examine deepfakes in particular and how the courts, they have a court-centered approach, but how they can understand deepfakes and potential misuses of AI. And they're working on some working papers and some webinars about it that they'll be pushing out soon. So NCSC is probably the best resource for that specific question at the moment.
What I wanted to get at there is that these issues are coming up faster than we've responded. I'm actually in the same working group, but I wanted to clarify, it's not like we've defined an answer yet, and it's gonna be critically important that the legal aid community issue spots this stuff and elevates it, whether it's to technology partners, whether it's to the court system, and I think that we're gonna see a lot of evolution on this, and this is one of those reasons why us developing this knowledge base now will position us better to spot these issues as they come up.
Great question. All right, we have time for one more question. Yep.
My question is about U.S. data policies. Y'all seem to be the experts, sorry. But the GDPR in Europe and for the European Union, most states, I know there's the California data privacy, but certainly in Tennessee and Arkansas, we don't have anything like that. What do y'all see on the horizon as, I assume we are the data controllers in these agreements. What protections do you see in the U.S. Upcoming?
Well, in some cases, you're the data controller, but in many cases, you're the data processor. So that's just one thing to keep in mind.
I mean, something that defines which we are and what our responsibilities are, anything like that.
I mean, outside of data security and protection, there's also just a ton of regulatory activity on AI more broadly, right? And it's true internationally, it's true in this country, it's true states. There was a period where there were 22 open AI bills in front of the California legislature. And so it's obviously a really complex and evolving dynamic. I think the regulatory environment seems to be focusing more heavily on things like deepfakes, on these issues that have broader societal applications, less about kind of the professional uses of the tool. But I think it does raise an important question about making sure that our institutions, similar like I said before, don't treat AI as a monolith, but are distinguishing between different applications of AI. So for instance, when we saw the courts kind of had a flurry of activity really early in this, it was all very negative. It was, don't use AI in my court, don't use AI in litigation. There were a few really bad examples of lawyers irresponsibly putting information into briefs where they didn't validate with the source materials. I think we're seeing a kind of a step back from that really kind of aggressive positioning and saying, okay, wait, we're seeing that AI has a lot of huge opportunity and we need to be more nuanced in our kind of regulatory frameworks around it. That said, I'm not going to pretend that I'm like a kind of foreign jurisdiction regulatory expert on AI. It's extremely fast moving though and pretty complex, and so everyone who's operating in this space and developing is staying hyper aware of that dynamic.
Of course. All right, we are at time. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate the conversation and the great questions.
Thank you.
If you can go to the